is a very high incidence of lethal gunshot wounds to the head, raising the strong suspicion of executions at the time of surrender, with aimed headshots to stationary, highly visible targets.
And these pictures he described as
compelling evidence of systematic executions and likely sexual assault of female prisoners prior to execution.
So will anyone be brought to justice for these crimes? That depends to a great extent on the international community and the United Nations itself.
Amnesty is really concerned with the significant number of people who are alleged to have been killed in the last months of the armed struggle in 2009. And therefore Amnesty is urging that there be an international, impartial investigation to get at the truth, and therefore to work toward reconciliation within Sri Lanka. And we argue as well that the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission that's been appointed by the government is not likely adequate to accomplish that. And Amnesty says that because of its research in the 9 different commissions and inquiries that have been held in Sri Lanka since 1991 until 2009. So for a period of 20 years, there have been numerous investigations, commissions, and inquiries appointed, and yet, despite people being named as likely guilty of human rights violations or even of humanitarian legal violations, there have been no serious prosecution. So Amnesty is really concerned with that and thinks that the best way to resolve all these allegations that are out there is to have an international inquiry. Most recently, Amnesty has spoken out about the video that was produced in the UK and that many people here have seen in Canada and around the world for that matter, the Channel 4 UK video that is about a 1-hour documentary alleging various violations in the same period about which Amnesty is concerned. And so Amnesty again thinks that this video by Channel 4 illustrates that there's such serious concerns alleged by so many different people and sources and groups that it's just crucial and important to get at the truth. So we are not alleging ourselves necessarily that Sri Lanka is guilty or that the Tamil Tigers are guilty, but there are allegations about both the government and about the Tamil Tigers that Amnesty argues should be resolved and investigated internationally in an impartial investigation.
I want to tell you a little bit of the story of a young woman I'm going to call Priya, who I met in British Columbia when I was there for the NDP's convention. She was somebody who lived in an IDP camp and recently came to Canada, and she's going to, and Priya, I had the opportunity to meet her and have a conversation with her, and she spoke of how everybody, my brothers and sisters, our brethren, are being treated in these camps, and how life is not pleasant, and how the youth are being left to live and die in their own feces, how they weren't fed, how medical attention was only provided once a week, and that is one doctor who's allowed to visit a camp once a week. And this is a camp with hundreds of thousands of people. There's no way that one doctor, or a doctor and a nurse, a tag team, can actually service the needs, the medical needs of the people who are living in these camps. I must also say that she was violated personally. Her body was violated by people who were there to be protective of the camps as well. And this is not something that any of us can be silent about. When you're entrusted and you're told this is a safe space for you to live in as much dignity as you can hold on to, that these people here are here to look after you and maintain your safety and dignity, those people cannot continue to violate the people who are seeking refuge, who are internally displaced in their own home.
The second issue is with respect to the geopolitical situation which Sri Lanka finds itself. Clearly, the Americans are hearing the call of their bankers and will be withdrawing from larger geopolitical issues over time. Arguably, as some have argued at least, we are seeing the decline of the American empire in our lifetime. So I don't think that we will or we can look to any American intervention in Sri Lanka. As Henry Kissinger has famously said, countries only have interests, and Sri Lanka would not constitute interest for America.
Main points were really to talk about these allegations of what went on during the final phases of the civil war, namely the number of civilian casualties, the methods that were applied, and the fact that there were lots of violations that took place. So basically what I did in the article was to actually go back and look at some of these findings and propose some recommendations going forward.
So what are your recommendations?
My recommendation is that we need to think seriously about having an international inquiry, because that's the only way that we can have an impartial and independent process in order to find out what went wrong, and I think there are lessons that can probably be taken from them.
And who do you propose as the head of the inquiry?
Well, ideally the UN should be doing this through the UN Security Council or any other organs. That's basically what I would suggest.
And do you have support in the West for your cause? Western countries?
It's hard to know. I think the US has asked the Sri Lankan government for explanations, and we've also asked for investigations. The UK has also asked for investigations. I think everyone is sort of waiting to see what the domestic accountability mechanism in Sri Lanka will deliver, because they do have a process in place which is called the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission. So everybody's waiting to see what that commission will deliver. And then maybe that's probably where they will start thinking about.
I put a request in for a visa and said I wanted to visit an IDP camp. I listed the camp that Ranji had given me, and I was told by the Sri Lankan High Commission that I wasn't welcome in Sri Lanka. And I thought to myself, what does that say about that government? It says it's a government that is obviously very intent on secrecy. It's a government that doesn't want to see itself exposed. When you don't allow parliamentarians to visit a country that that was for many decades a proud part of the Commonwealth, I think it's a travesty, and it goes to show that there were acts of terrorism. There's acts of human rights abuses that the government was clearly involved in. And I've always found that to be a tremendous indication that there was something very unjust occurring there. When you don't have transparency, when you try to hide something, I think that is a dangerous indication. And I think what we do with the Channel 4 video is we can use that as a rallying cry to continue to build pressure that something needs to be done, and that we need to continue to encourage the UN to see this through, to see this to ensure that those that committed the war crimes are going to eventually be behind bars that they so richly deserve. And if it wasn't strong enough, having the General Fonseca actually be willing to testify that war crimes occurred.
Still, the government shelling of the hospital continued. On the 12th of May, the hospital was shelled again.
And all of a sudden shot bombs. When I came out, and it was just like, again, full of dead bodies into pieces.
For Dr. Samaraja, it was clear the situation was becoming impossible.
So I want to call up Jeevan. Where is he?
We just saw the footage from when the government had shelled the hospital. But we know this is all truth that we had known for years, and advocates, many advocates and people like me had been talking about and saying that the government was targeting hospitals, schools, orphanages. But the government of Sri Lanka continued to deny this, continued to deny that there was any type of targeted shelling towards civilians. We just saw living proof of it.
As soon as they leave their country or travel into a country that has named them, they can be arrested and they can be put in the Hague.
I think our collective frustration is the government of Sri Lanka has not been willing to allow particular missions, whether the UN or a particular office of the UN, into their country to do that kind of investigation recently. Real criticisms of the UN too.
Which again proves how the UN can be a strange organization to deal with. On the one hand, you have a Secretary General that sets up a panel to give him recommendations, and then when the recommendations come and they tell him that if he has to do an independent inquiry, he says he doesn't have the responsibility, he doesn't have the authority, to do that, right? So even though he himself actually asked that this panel be constituted, and in fact, going back to your point, the UNSC can do it. And we know that one of the problems with it, the geopolitics, is that you have two members, Russia and China, who at a minimum will probably abstain from voting, which would be good.
That would be good.
If they abstain, it's fine, but if they veto it, then there's no point. So that would be one channel, but I think there are other channels as well. I mean, I've looked at the way the system works. You can go through other UN organs if you want to pursue this matter. You don't have to go to the UNSC only. And as far as I remember, the prosecutor at the ICC has the authority, if he or she wants, to actually launch one. Whether they want to do it, that's a different situation. Most people think of the UNSC as the only route to go through. But given the geopolitics, I don't think it's actually the best one for one, and I don't think it's the only one. But that's something, which is why I think these kinds of meetings are very good for people such as myself and for you as well, because I want us to think about ways through which we can make this work, even though I know that there are all kinds of obstacles in the way, right? But it doesn't mean that you have to stop. There are certainly other ways to think about the problem and maybe come up with better solutions.
You know that there's a larger agenda than just getting rid of what is called terrorism. It continues to happen even after the LTTE has officially been annihilated, officially been destroyed. Disbanded, dismembered, I don't know what the proper term is here. We need to have an unbiased, independent inquiry, and that is what I have been calling for. And the next step right now, I think that we have, is this tool. The Channel 4 News documentary that they've released, The Killing Fields, is a tool that shows what is happening today, or what happened, and what continues to happen in the island, or on the island of Sri Lanka. People continue to be internally displaced people in their home countries, and that is not okay with me, and that is not okay with, I think, many of us here.
The Tigers were branded a terrorist organization. If you remember, some of the things that they did were not necessarily happy-making, or, shall we say, would entice people to get on board what their cause was, and I think that the Tamil population that was caught in the crossfire is now paying for a lot of those mistakes, or call it what you may, that occurred at that time. And I think these are real issues, but I think one of the things that I stress to the people here and time again is you've got to keep focused on what the hell you want to do, if I may put it really bluntly. And my read of this is that the most important thing that has to be done now is to convince whatever international body you can to get somebody in there to protect the population. Everything else can follow from that. As long as they're protected and at least some humanitarian aid gets in, you have a population that will survive.
Because I could understand Tamil, I could actually understand what the woman who was lying there, who said, I was injured and I came to the hospital, and now the shelling, I lost both my legs. When patients in a hospital are being attacked.
That's for sure. Murder is murder is murder.